Hello, I'm Don Stull, a professor at the MIT Sloan School of Management and co-founder of CultureX. My co-host Charlie is on vacation in Patagonia this week, so I'll be flying solo. Today, we're delighted to speak with Steve Richman, the CEO of Techtronic Industries and the former president of its flagship Milwaukee Tool subsidiary. First off, Steve, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here. Excited about the opportunity, Don.
Great. So when Steve joined Milwaukee Tool as president in 2007, it was 83 years old and sold a limited range of traditional power tools. By traditional, I mean you kind of plugged it in if you wanted it to work. And during his tenure as president, Steve's led a remarkable transformation of the company's strategy and its culture that's produced a steady stream of technical and product innovations, starting with move to battery powered, but augmented by a set of other very interesting technologies that allow them to provide solutions, integrated solutions to their target market. So today, Milwaukee Tool sells a wide range of cordless power tools targeted to the building trades and is the market share leader in North America and globally. And the steady stream of new products has allowed Milwaukee Tool to really excel not only for their customers, not only for their employees, which we'll talk about in a minute, but also for investors. So, basically they've delivered double-digit revenue growth year in and year out for nearly 2 decades. So think about that. There, you don't see many century-old companies delivering that kind of growth. And not surprisingly, given that that revenue growth, Milwaukee Tool's parent company has generated total shareholder returns of about 17% compound annual growth versus 7% for their direct competitors. So almost 3x their direct competitors and 11% for the industrial sector as a whole. So really outperformed in terms of financial returns. And Steve attributes much of the company's success to the great people and its distinctive culture. And Milwaukee Tool employees agree. So Milwaukee Tool has been voted by employees one of Glassdoor's best places to work for 3 of the last 5 years. That's impressive in and of itself. But what's really interesting is that not only do employees love the culture, they also say Milwaukee Tool excels on the very core values that it emphasizes. And these are things like empowered leaders, candid discussions, speed, agility, urgency, a sense of obsession. So and for frequent viewers of our podcast, you'll be familiar with this analysis. We analyzed how more than 40,000 employees described their company in Glassdoor reviews for 27 industrial companies. So now we're taking a broad competitive set. And what this chart is showing, the horizontal axis is the percentage of employees who mention, in this case, a specific topic, empowerment, which is one of the core values of Milwaukee Tool. And what we see is Milwaukee Tool employees are almost twice as likely to mention empowerment as their peers in other industrial companies. The vertical axis measures the percentage of employees who, when they talk about empowerment, talk about it positively. And again, Milwaukee Tool employees are more than twice as likely to talk about empowerment positively. And we see the same thing for candid discussions and for agility, the other core values of Milwaukee Tool. So a really great example of a culture champion where the culture is driving, great solutions for the target customers, those folks in the building trade, great investment returns, very satisfied employees, but actually delivering on the core set of values that the company aspires to, in contrast to most companies, which unfortunately don't walk the talk. So really one of the most interesting stories we've seen in our research on culture champions, and we're just so delighted to have you here today, Steve. So maybe let's start and turn back the clock. So you joined the company in 2007. It's a mid-sized traditional company, again, 80 years old. under 500 million in revenues. You're competing against companies that are, roughly 10x your size.
Absolutely.
DeWalt, Black and Decker, Makita, household names. What was your assessment when you walked in the door? Your first couple of months there, as you walked in, what was your evaluation of Milwaukee Tool?
Don, it was immediate for myself and others because a group of us all joined in the same time in the January of that year. And there were some other people that worked for me in the past or with me in the past that were already there. And our assessment was really clear. We had the gun to our head. We were this small little company trying to compete with global giants. We didn't have the right culture. We clearly did not have the right people. And part of that cultural element is we had zero focus on our user and understanding what their pain points are. We had no relationships with our vendors and our strategic partners from a vendor community. And we realized that we needed to turn this around. And that assessment up front was really not about culture. It was about how do we bring great people in? How do we communicate to people the vision of where we wanted to go, which was a relentless focus then on core trades, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing end users. And our viewpoint was if we could innovate, and we use Clayton Christian's perspective of disruptive innovation, if we could drive that innovation, we could win and we could change the game. And we told the team members at that point that you have a choice. We have the people that are jumping on board, want to be part of the change. We have the other people that have heard it before, and that's what they told us. We heard about growing, we heard about investment, we heard about change. And then we had the other people that didn't want to be any part of it. And they opted out pretty quickly. Our first couple of years, we didn't care about culture. It was about what did we have to do together, working unbelievable amounts of hours and time and energy to try to turn the company around to an innovator, focus on users, really getting the best people as part of the team, and building respect from not only our users, but our distribution partners.
And let's maybe dig in a little bit to the content of that, that kind of vision and strategy, and then we'll talk about the culture bit as we move forward. So, you brought this kind of crystal clear focus to the trades, right? And, very clear, this is our target customer. In those early years, as you were trying to win them over against these kind of global giants, what was your value proposition to them? What were you, kind of promising to them to get them excited about working with Milwaukee Tool? And how was that differentiated from the other big players?
So bottom line, what the team came up with collectively was we want to be a solution provider to the core trades, driving productivity and safety on the job. And that was our vision in the beginning. Now, earning that respect was we set the vision, but setting the vision clearly did not deliver anything to them up front. It was a rallying cry to get the respect of those users, and in the same time, communicating to our distribution partners, hey, this is where we were going. We're going to stop doing everything else. We were going to focus on these areas of importance for us to be able to win, and getting the organization to understand that saying no is the most difficult challenge. Saying yes is easy for anybody. And we said yes to only the most important elements of our success. Now, to be real frank, it was easy for us to do that. We were this small little company that our brand was your grandfather's brand. It was the brand that old plumbers and electricians and mechanical contractors came up with. But the new users did not think of us that way. And our distribution partners said the same thing.
Yeah, it's funny. My grandfather did love Milwaukee Tools, that's exactly how I thought about that brand. And so, great. So you're kind of relentlessly focused on this target customer. You're going to provide solutions that improve productivity and safety on the job for those target customers. There's also this element of the transition to cordless. How did that all to battery powered? How did that all fit into the strategy?
So when we all joined, the situation was really clear. Everybody else had committed to NiCad technology, which had been around for years and years. Now, the challenge with NiCad technology was that NiCad didn't have the power, didn't have the runtime, could not replace all of those corded tools. New technology that we had global patents on before we joined was lithium technology. And lithium was viewed by our competitors who had the innovator's dilemma, and that was the Bosch, the Makitas, the Stanley Black & Deckers, i.e. DeWalt, the Hiltis, and that was disrupting their whole model and their revenue stream. So for us, it was saying, okay, how do we make lithium safe? How do we take that lithium technology that we have these global patents on and increase the runtime? How do we make it so that it's not only forward and backward compatible for the future, but that we could change the game in terms of cold weather and hot weather performance, runtime, cycle life of those batteries? And that was the perspective that the team worked on. And then how could you partner that with the latest technology in motors down the road? And on top of motors, how can you partner with people like Texas Instruments or ST or Infineon and be the latest in technology from the total system aspect versus just battery technology by itself, which would not get you to the promised land?
Right. Okay. So an integrated part of this kind of solution was the transition. And again, a great illustration of Clay's, disruptive technology where, you put the competitors in a bind because they had committed to an alternative technology and
they had the innovator's dilemma, no question about it. They did not want to switch.
Perfect. So you come in, you kind of articulate a vision, very like kind of textbook. I was talking to some of my students this morning saying this Milwaukee Tool is the perfect strategy case because it's, a clear target customer, clear value proposition. You start to build the resource and capabilities to deliver on it. So, great strategy. Now let's talk about, kind of shift gears to the culture bit of this. So in pursuing this strategy, when did culture start to kind of get on your radar screen, and what led to that becoming kind of the culture side of things being more important in the team's thinking?
So Don, I would say up front, the first few years, the culture of the business was everybody understands we're turning this around and we have to spend whatever time necessary to disrupt the market as part of our culture. Really an outside-in viewpoint, which is part of our culture today. At the same time, those first few years, there was no perspective of people and their families and their time. That wasn't it. We had a limited amount of time. We had a team for this turnaround, and everybody knew they had to be committed to a level that was, I would say, not only extraordinary. We called them Qdoba nights every night. Monday through Thursday, everybody had free Qdoba dinners inside our main facility, which wasn't, remember, 207 people to start with that handled everything and less than 100 people on new product development. And then a switch happened. Then we were starting to have some success. And it was myself and the rest of the leadership team and two gentlemen that were our senior leaders on the marketing side, a guy named Tim Brash and another guy named Paul Fry, walked in the office one night and said, Steve, Shane, Daryl, Ty, this isn't sustainable. We're not going to be able to continue to do what we're doing and grow to the level that we want to grow unless we really step back and say, what do we want our culture to be? And what will that culture be in the future? Because our culture is unique, no question about it. but people have to understand what the culture is. And everybody, as we're growing and bringing new people in, has to be part of that culture moving forward. And that was the tipping point that led us to redefine, or let me say, define a culture that we realized after a lot of time needed to be aspirational, not where we were at that moment.
Great. So let me pause you there for a second. We're going to really dig in here. So what was it what was it that led Tim and Paul to that point of view? Was it, what were the kind of signals or leading indicators that got them thinking, hey, this isn't sustainable? Was it the hours? Was it that you were growing so fast?
It was a combination of new people joining and talented people leaving. And we had some talented people that were walking out of the door that said, what's in it for me? And why am I going to continue doing this to this kind of level? And then new people coming in saying, I love all these aspects of the company that were agile, that were innovative, that were disrupting. But am I going to be empowered? And what does empowered mean? And how is that going to work for us going forward? So multiple different levels. There's no easy button in this at all. And there clearly wasn't at that point in time.
Okay, so, kind of classic case, and we see this in a lot of startups. So what's, again, such an interesting story, the Milwaukee Tool story, that this is, at this point, going on 90-year-old company where this is happening. We see this in startups where, you've got the starting team, it's all hands on deck, super passionate, super engaged. And then you have to grow and you start scaling, and you both have some people saying like, oh, I'm not sure I can sustain this pace. And you
100%.
need to hire a lot of people, and you have to get clarity on the goals. So kind of articulating the culture in order to scale is a classic inflection point that we see mainly in startups. So it's super neat that we see it in an established company here. So maybe could you talk us through a little bit the process you went through? So, you
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we all came together. There was a broad leadership team, key leaders in our sales organization, key leaders in our what we call our job site solutions team, key leaders in engineering and marketing and finance and IT. Cross-functional leadership team of our senior leaders got together. And we worked with an outside leader, outside consultant that came in. And we spent a year working on what we wanted the culture to be, the why. And to be frank, we were done with that year, getting ready to launch it. Had worked on, Shane Mall, who runs all of our power tool business today. We have multiple business leaders in the Milwaukee side. He runs that piece. Our best writer, and Shane pulled it together, wrote it. We got up the next morning. We were on an offsite. We read it. And quite frankly, excuse my French, but we all called bullshit on it. It wasn't who we were. It was what everybody else says about culture. And we realized right then that we're different. Let's step back and say who we are and what we want to be. We read through, it was interesting. That morning, we read through what Netflix said about their culture. And we realized that they weren't ordinary. They weren't going to make their culture something that was going to fit everybody. And we realized then that we had to create a series of words and the definitions of those words to not only recruit people, but to train people, to invest in people. And that need to be aspirational of where we wanted to take it, because there was going to be different parts of the company that would be at different points during this journey. And that led us to defining these words throughout that day and saying, what do we want those words mean to us? And where do we want to take the company on the foundation that would allow us to recruit the best people, retain the best people, invest in the best people, and have a culture that we could build on over time.
Great. So let's kind of stick in this meeting, okay? So you come in, you have a and we see this all the time, by the way, where a leadership team will realize like we can't really, we have to discover the culture and articulate what's already there and crystallize it rather than trying to impose something, right? And that's so that realization is a common one. And so now you're at that point, you're talking it through, and one of the super interesting tensions that I imagine the team was managing was, on the one hand, you want a culture that works for people, that's sustainable, that as you're trying to attract and grow the
100%.
team. On the other hand, you need a culture to deliver on this vision of continuous innovation and disruption. And so,
And growth.
and growth, right? Absolutely. All this fueling growth. So how, do you recall like what, how did that discussion unfold? Were there a lot of disagreements? Were you, how a lot of
We
giving and
battle. We battle. And the great news about the team and the team that's there today, and the broader team with our sales leaders throughout the globe on the Milwaukee side of our business, is that they battle. That candid dialogue was part of the conversation and part of the culture of the leadership team. We've been through the wars together, and we were fighting words like candid. Well, can you really say candid? That was one of the big questions. And the end result was the viewpoint that if we're not willing to be candid with each other in a respectful way, and we always said that candid for a group of people that have worked together for 5 years or 10 years or 15 years is very different than being candid with somebody that walks in the door tomorrow and doesn't have a relationship, and has not built trust. So what we said was that we have to say candid, but we have to say the criteria for candid is we want to help each other get better. We want to help the organization improve. We want to do it in a respectful way. It is not personal. It's about the business. It's about how I can help you, how you can help me, and how we can grow together. And that was one element of the many cultural elements that were there that we had to fight through.
And yeah, it's so interesting because you had this kind of war-hardened team that had gone through so much together, and I can imagine very easy for you to have candid discussions, but somebody new coming in with, as you say, without the relationship, without the trust, without the background. Okay, so you're spelling that out. Another thing I think is interesting here is the focus on empowerment, right? Because I can imagine with such a strong team that had gotten the traction in the marketplace from a very tough starting position, let's be frank.
100%.
Um, you could imagine, and I've seen situations where those leaders tend to be, kind of too hands-on. So this required you and your team to step back and give space to folks. So how, in that discussion, how were you talking about empowerment? How did that come up?
Don, let me say it this way. When we first started in the turnaround, myself and Shane and Scott Griswold, Daryl Hendricks, Jamie Christian, Bill Hughes, James Wamsley, the guy who runs our Canadian business, Craig Baxter, or Mike Brendel in Australia, or Alex in Europe, or Ty on the financial side. All of us were knee deep into every single element. I mean, every part of the product development we were involved in, and we had meetings that were more than candid. I would tell you that if I look back and how I approached it then, I would not approach it today the same way. It was over the top. And we learned through this exercise that, hey, we had to empower people, but we had to explain what empowerment meant. And let me say it that way, that there were a lot of people that believed that empowerment meant I could do whatever I wanted to do, versus us framing the empowerment, and we had to learn that over the time, that you are empowered in this area. And part of that empowerment means that when something goes wrong, when you smell that there's a problem, when you see there's a cost overrun, when you see you need help, you need to raise your hand. you need to ask for help and support. And that, unlike other companies, is not a bad thing. That is a good thing. And that will help us accomplish our objectives, help you accomplish your objectives. So empowerment was not a free for all. Empowerment has been, how do we drive that success with an operating rhythm behind it? And then how do we accomplish that through people understanding that they need to be able to recognize when they need help and support and either money or people or resources to be able to get that going in the right direction. And we've had a lot of times where it's worked, and we've had times where it hasn't.
Yeah, it's super interesting that kind of coupling of empowerment with accountability, to get that sense of
100%.
ownership. But
Actually, we changed the wording now. The team came back and changed the wording on empowerment to extreme ownership. And to your point, the reason they did that was to clarify to people, you're empowered. That also means you own it. And James Wamsley who runs our operations for Milwaukee globally, was passionate about that. He said, this is why we need people to understand that they're accountable, and also that they own it, and also that they're empowered. And here's the scope of that.
And so let me pause there for a minute. And how, as a team, so I just have an image of you guys like going down and like saying, no, we need that to be a quarter of an inch to the left, and because you were so immersed in the business. It must have been, as you grew, like how did you as a team step back, to give the space, create the space for the new folks that you were hiring, that you had to hire and that had to expand their roles to grow?
There were very different tipping points along the way. I will say, as a business, every part of our business has great operating rhythm to review, but also the agility to be able to make the decisions. So there were different tipping points where, the team came to me and said, Steve, we know you love new product development, but we need you to stay out. And Ty, who our CFO, and Ty, I understand you want all the financials to go to you, but we need to set up separate parts of the business with clear accountability and responsibility to be able to make that happen. And I would say it's been part of the journey that each and every one of the leaders had to learn that level of empowerment and extreme ownership. At the same time, there were many times that we had to take it back. We had a disaster in a launch of an ERP system in 2017. And it led us to not being able to ship. You talk to our customers, they still remember it. We had 6 months of hell. 3 months, myself and other leaders were in our distribution center, working nonstop in our DC because we messed it up. Why? We took empowerment to the extreme. We told the team that they were responsible for the change. We told the leaders they were responsible for reporting on it. And the end result was that everybody below them knew it was going to be a failure. And these leaders did not have the ability to frame up what the risk and opportunities were. And they didn't want to share the bad news. And that led us to today. Each one of the leaders across the business has skip level meetings down to various different levels in the organization. And getting that input, building that trust, and understanding that as you grow, your ability to do things the same way, if you want to do it the same way, that's the definition of insanity. You have to change. You have to adapt. And that's on the cultural aspect as well.
And let me just pick up one more thread of the culture, which you've touched on, but dig into a little bit more, which is around agility. So again, I can imagine when you're a team with a couple of hundred folks, you're David fighting Goliath, that it comes probably reasonably naturally. But then as the company's growing, as you're trying to empower the teams and, have, they're kind of growing and doing their own thing. How are you thinking about embedding that agility and making sure you retain that agility as you grow? Because most companies struggle with that.
I will tell you that today, one of our key strengths is still our agility. Our team's ability to understand that the economic situation is changing and we need to move people from one area to another area, that there's a golden opportunity that they have framed up. We call it excel to invest, new opportunity, and we need to free up money or resources to invest in those new areas. And the way that we have done it is a lot of training and development to our leaders, where our leaders at different levels go through different types of internal training that we have, our leadership training, and they understand why agility is so important. And that could be in our field sales organization. I'll give you a classic example. You're well aware residential construction and remodeling is down versus other areas. Now, that isn't the largest part of our business today, but it's down. And we had dedicated some resources towards that in a big way. And our teams came back and said, we're going to move all those resources towards mega projects, towards battery plants, towards chip plants, towards new energy sources, towards the utility sector. And that's what they did. And they did it in a quick fashion. That's part of our culture. That's part of the understanding. And when we have a problem, the team rallied together. One of the things that years ago, our sales leadership had some issues where there were parts of the team, our job site solution team that call on users, and our sales team that is in a region. And let's say it was in California, and the sales team was failing and the JSS team said they were succeeding. And our sales leaders, Daryl Hendricks and Bill Hughes and Jamie Christian and Shad Hansen, said, you know what, we got to change this philosophy here. It's got to be one team. So how they were graded was based on the one team. And one of the culture elements we've really added is a one team. We've actually now taken that one team philosophy from Milwaukee globally that we're expanded to TTI and making people understand that it's not just about you. It's not just about your business. It's about what we're doing to support each of the brands, but also the total company.
Yeah. So so you've kind of articulated this set of values as a team, and kind of clear in your minds how this is going to help you to win in the marketplace. Okay. And so at that point in time, when you had that discussion about, kind of crystallizing the culture, how many employees would you have had? 500-ish?
Right around 500. Yes.
Okay. So something around
500 in our corporate headquarters of Milwaukee, we had additional in our sales organization in the US and in Canada and Australia and EMEA as well.
Okay.
And at our manufacturing facilities throughout the globe.
Right. So now you're at, I don't know, something like 10,000 employees for Milwaukee Tool?
Today, more than that.
Oh,
today,
okay.
more than that.
But
to your point, what did we do at that tipping point of when we were starting to grow? We realized we needed to communicate. So we had our brand team pull people together, come up with an approach, make it a big event. And we tied that to what we called a big goal. That big goal was 5-20-20, $5 billion in revenue, 20% growth per year in 2020. Now we beat that goal, which was crazy because when we launched it, we didn't think that was going to be feasible. And we pulled a meeting together for the Americas. And that meeting was about the big goal, but most importantly, it was about culture and people. And we had all of the senior leaders, everybody director and above in that meeting. And they talked through examples of cultural elements in different aspects of the business. And we had the key leaders talk about what it meant to them and the why behind it and why it will help us be successful. And that was the launch of the culture formally. And then we took that same element and we expanded it to the entire campus. And then we did it in our manufacturing facilities and our other regions throughout the globe. We didn't always do it well. Sometimes we had to go back and do it a second and third time because we learned in those areas it needed to be different in a manufacturing site in Mississippi. We needed to make sure how we were doing it versus the way that we were doing it for engineers and product development people and salespeople as well. And that was the first launch of the culture.
And so maybe could you dig in a little bit, like how would it be different in a manufacturing facility versus your new product development team? Like what did you learn along the way? Because this is such a critical challenge for leaders trying to build a culture is they'll say, okay, we want candid discussions. Well, candor looks different among a bunch of engineers versus folks who are working in on the front lines in the factory. There's regional difference, Wisconsin versus the South. There, you can imagine a lot of differences. So, but you want that candor, or you want that agility, or you want that empowerment, even though it looks and feels a little bit different. So maybe.
I think what we learned was that the specificity of the examples from the people that are there is what is required. And when we first did it, we made it all about what the team thought was important in Brookfield, Wisconsin. And what we realized real quickly was, well, that's not the right approach. So part of that was a perspective that the team came forward and said is that we need to make this also about what's important for me, the person that's receiving the information. So why is it important for them? Well, in Mississippi, to explain about the culture and about that it's one team and that we care, it was the viewpoint to say, we are putting in a healthcare facility in the manufacturing facilities. Why? Because we not only care about you, we care about the health of your families and the ability to be able to understand that. So the little elements that those people talked about were absolutely essential for our short and long-term success. And there clearly was difference, cultural differences, elements. But I will tell you, the core of the culture is not only what we have in the US, it's in Latin America, it's in EMEA, it's in Australia, it's in Asia. Some of the words are slightly different and the definitions are different, but the root of what the culture means is identical on a globe for the Milwaukee business.
And have you, one of the things we hear leaders talk about is the struggle with, and I'll take Candid, for instance, because that's a classic example where,
Sure is.
in the Anglo-American world, candor is, arguably easier to achieve than it might be in Japan or Korea, where there's a different set of national cultural norms. Like, how did you go about embedding that, that specific value of candor and as, in different, and maybe even in, Mississippi, it might be different.
I will tell you, I don't think candid is easy anywhere. I think everywhere in the globe, candid is the most challenging cultural element of any company. And we believe that it really leads to success or failure. The how really becomes letting people understand that talking to each other about what's right or wrong and how things are going is the viewpoint that I care about you. And the first element is building trust. So you got to build trust to be able to be candid, right? Because if somebody believes if I'm going to tell you there's something wrong, you're going to get fired the next day for explaining that, then they're not going to be candid. Now, if part of that culture becomes, it is explaining to everybody that you need to be candid, but you also need to represent multiple right options. Here's the different options that we have to be able to solve that problem. And one of them could be, I'm not sure if I know what to do. Here's some other ideas. but there's no penalty about being candid. There's a penalty if you believe you're going to try to get everything done by yourself, or you're not going to allow people to grow and learn. Then that is the penalty. Then you're not a cultural fit for the company and the business.
Right. And what as a top team, and again, maybe let's shift gears to this period of really kind of amazing growth for the industry you're in and sustained over time and, not driven by just goosing up prices, by really increasing willingness to pay for the customer, which is the way you want growth to happen. I mean, just a great, great growth story. you know, how, what is the leadership team were you doing as you're bringing on new people, building the team, and, empowering them to make sure that those norms with the new people as they were coming in were, kind of instilled? How did you know how things were going? What did you, uh, activities as a team or as individuals within the team did you take to try to instill and embed that culture? Because a lot of companies struggle with that. They have a great core culture with the team that starts, but as it grows it becomes diluted.
I would tell you there's been many times where we have realized that we needed a reboot of the culture, and a reboot of the culture led to extensive training and development and onboarding. Before my new role, everybody in the Americas that had joined the company that was at the corporate level or at the manager level, I did a big goal meeting. And that big goal meeting was talking about the culture, talking about the why, talking about why it's important for you. That was one element. Now, that still happens today with the other key executive leaders doing that. The other points and times were, how are we going to know, is the culture really working? Because everyone that's a good leader, a strong leader that has a strong perspective on themselves, and I'll go back to, there was one senior engineering leader. We are getting ready to kick off a survey that we do. We do consistently as surveys throughout the globe now on our brands and on our people. And he said, I don't have any issues. It's not about me. It's other parts of the organization that have issues. We did the survey, got the information back, and he was a medium to low performer. What was his reaction? I have to change. So one of the reasons we expanded our talent team, expanded our training and development team, was to understand that we need to drive the right cultural elements. We need people to understand that the day you believe you have all the answers and we're an absolute success, that paranoid viewpoint that we have as leaders is that we're going to fail. And so opinion surveys, skip level management, building training and development, building the right talent organization, all of those elements. And for the Milwaukee team, for the Americas, it really went to the next level this year, where in 2024, they rolled out the next big goal and the next cultural alignment across the business. And the job they did that went all throughout the facilities not only excited people, but brought people to a level to understand we really do care about people. We really do care about culture. And right now at TTI, we are taking that same approach to the rest of our brands and the rest of our facilities throughout the globe. Culture is a little bit different, maybe a little unique and based on the brand. And we're in the middle of doing that right as we speak today.
And how, on this journey, Steve, how did you ensure that the new employees that you hired for key positions, the folks that you promoted, were kind of embodying and reinforcing the values that you wanted through their teams? And especially, again, as things became bigger and became more decentralized through empowerment, how were you as a top team, how did you gain confidence that these distributed leaders really were the, kind of champions of culture that you needed to?
First of all, on the recruiting front, that's a key part of it. Does the individual, does the leader accomplish that objective? Second, training and development. How do we ensure we have the proper training and development program, not only for new people, but for people that we are now putting in leadership positions, and they're getting the right feedback for that kind of success? Next, it's with those skip levels, how do we make sure we're doing the opinion surveys to ensure that we know what is happening? And is it happening correctly? And are we doing the right things? Now, let me tell you, we've had some failures. We had one department in our organization where there were a lot of engineers brought in, and those engineers were leaving after 12 months. And the senior leader that had that under her umbrella said, you know what? These people just wanted to move to Colorado. It's post-COVID. They wanted to move to a place where they can be outdoors. Our team is all in-house at Milwaukee. They are there. We were an essential service, so people were still together. And that's why they're leaving. Well, finally, it kept on for a year plus. We kept on losing more and more people. And then the second year, we were the next group of people. So our talent team went and started not only doing exit surveys, but went to some people that had left and said, what is really going on? And finally, somebody stood up and said, this manager, this so-called leader, because he was not a leader, he was a manager. When they brought ideas to change the game to him, one of the talented individuals, she came forward and said, the response was, it's insubordination. For you to come and tell me that we should do things differently. We found that out, and we let that person go the next day. That manager, not leader. That type of approach, we hope, lets people understand that we're walking the walk.
Yeah. So let's maybe step back from you're in a new role. You can look back now on this amazing run at Milwaukee Tool. If you were giving and you probably get this question a lot, giving advice to another leader who's coming into an established organization, trying to change the culture, what would be your 2 or 3 key pieces of advice? What have you learned that you think other leaders could find helpful if they find themselves in a position like you did in 2007?
Yeah, number one is you have to surround yourself with the right people, the right team. And I'll tell you that I am fortunate today at TTI to have the best group of senior leaders across the business. And that's in the multiple different parts of the business and throughout the globe than anybody could ever wish for. So that's the starting point. The second piece, which I think is absolutely essential for any leader, is to build trust. It was interesting. I was having a conversation with a few senior leaders, a coaching moment, this past week. Last week. And the coaching moment was they were getting ready to have a communication meeting, and they had one meeting already with some senior leaders. And I watched the video of it. And I said to them, are you walking the walk of the culture that you are talking about? Are you communicating honestly and openly as much as you can with the other team members? Because I walked away and I didn't answer the question. I let them answer the question. I walked away from that believing that they weren't being honest with themselves and honest with the people to let them understand this is what we had to fix. This is what we had to change. This is what we need to do together to move forward as leaders. So number one, and the most important to me, is that candid communication of where you are. And if you're not willing to stand up and say where you are as a team and as a business and as a company, with a perspective of here's the steps that we are putting in place to change, then how could you expect that people believe that the culture is the right culture for success, or that you are going to walk the walk on that culture?
But I kind of just pause you for a minute on the kind of coaching aspect of that. So you actually watched a video. Do you do that frequently? I mean, how do you think about coaching your team? And like, that's really interesting.
My viewpoint is on getting coached or coaching the team. Number one, my expectation is I want to have a relationship with the rest of the team where they can tell me where I really messed up in my style or my communication or anything else, and that I can do the same. And that it is not about the end of a year, it's about shortly after. And everybody talks about the immediacy of coaching shortly after something happens. And you know, the best points, the best changes that I've had as a business and as a leader is, you know, early in my tenure here, there's one of our key leaders, a guy named Jamie Christian, and we had a meeting, and I was over the top in the meeting, and my tone and approach and my aggressiveness was not where it should be. Jamie pulled me into my office and said, in a nice way, but in a direct way, that you can't talk to me in that manner, in that approach. If you want to have a one-on-one and we want to lay it out, but you're doing that in a broad group, in a broad situation, and attacking me in that way, I'm not working for a leader like that. And it made me reflect of, you know, going back to that trust factor. You can do certain things when you're a group of senior leaders and you're together and it's only you in that small group, or one-on-one, how candid you can be, versus a broad audience and what that looks like. And there's a time and a place for different approaches. And not every approach can be the same in every single element. And I think that's why our leadership team all throughout TTI is so strong, because they get that.
Yeah, that's super powerful, that kind of two-way trust and coaching going both ways, and to, you know, kind of not only role model but reinforce and help leaders to develop the kind of cultural attributes that you want spread throughout the organization. So we're just nearing time, and I guess, you know, we've covered a lot of ground today. Are there elements of the story on the culture side that you think we should have discussed that we haven't? Like, what did we miss in our conversation?
You know, I touched on it with a few points where we failed, you know, business failure, or had some failure in the business. And I think that the piece that I really want to bring up is a core part of a successful culture. We believe, all of our leaders believe, is that when issues happen, because they will happen, when issues happen, it's not about pointing fingers. It is about understanding why and understanding how together we are going to fix it. Now, that is very different than somebody hiding what occurred and not willing to bring it to the table. And I think successful cultures, teams, people, parts of the organization can bring those elements up and bring them up in a way to be able to say, how are we going to rally the troops as one team, come together, fix it, figure out why we got into this mess, and what are we going to do to not do it again? That also ties to the culture of we're going to test and we're going to replicate in all different elements. It could be how we do firmware. It could be how we work with strategic supply partners. It's how we work with distribution partners. It's how we work with each other. We're going to test and replicate, and we're going to drive the heck out of it with speed. And those are elements that we believe have built the success of our company and our business.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, like anybody who's trying to compete on innovation, you do new things, things will go wrong and will surprise you.
No question.
That's the only thing we know with 100% certainty about innovation. And so that ability, you know, that kind of cultural, those operating principles that allow people to raise those issues and have candid discussions and feel a sense of ownership to solving them as, you know, one team. That really is at the heart of how you get agility, how you get innovation, and how what's so interesting about your story is how you sustain it over 20 years. You know, I mean, getting it for a year or two is one thing, getting it for a decade or two, a whole nother story.
And our team clearly believes they ended the Milwaukee team ended the 2024 100-year anniversary, as well as the next big goal and session, with a viewpoint that we're just getting started. And that's who we are. And we the team clearly believes it.
Wow. Well, what a perfect way, literally the perfect way, Steve, to bring our discussion to a close. I want to thank you again. I mean, it really, you know, we have the privilege of talking to and studying and learning about a lot of really neat, interesting, successful companies, and Milwaukee Tool is right there at the top, because that, you know, coming into 80-year-old company, you know, undersized, competing against really well endowed, you know, much larger competitors. You know, this isn't you know, this isn't AI. It's a more stable industry, and to have the kind of growth and success you've had, and where employees love it, and where you're really, at least based on our data, living those values that you try to imbue. It's a great story, and we appreciate you spending the time to walk us through it.
Thanks, Don. All about the people, all about the culture. They're the ones who make it happen.
Terrific. Well, thank you.
Thank you.